Trauma Therapist Podcast, episode 357. Welcome to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to raise the awareness of trauma and to help support and inspire new trauma workers through this podcast and my membership community, Trauma Therapist 2.0. Thanks so much for joining me today, and here we go. All right, guys, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. Very excited to have back Dr. Jamie Marich. Jamie, welcome.
Thank you, Guy. Glad to be back.
All right. So Jamie's been on the podcast before. She's been a guest on Trauma Therapist 2.0, and I'm very excited to have her back because it's I think safe to say that Jamie is on fire. Dr. Jamie Marich travels internationally, speaking on topics related to EMDR therapy, trauma, addiction, expressive arts, and mindfulness while maintaining a private practice in her home base in Warren, Ohio. She is the developer of the Dancing Mindfulness practice and delivered a TEDx talk on trauma in 2015. Jamie is the author of several books, including EMDR Therapy and Mindfulness for Trauma. That's in collaboration with Dr. Stephen Dansiger. Dancing Mindfulness, Trauma in the 12 Steps, Trauma Made Simple, Competencies in Assessment, Treatment, and Working with Survivors. And her newest book, which we're going to be kind of focusing on today, is called Process Not Perfection, Expressive Arts, Solutions for Trauma Recovery. Whew, welcome. Welcome back.
Thank you. All
right.
Always great to be talking with you.
I appreciate that. So before we dive in, for those of our listeners who maybe haven't caught any of the other podcasts or whatever, give us a snapshot. I was thinking before you jumped on here of all literally, again, I was reading your bio, and it's really incredible and inspiring what you're doing, how much you're doing. But I was thinking, what the heck, Jamie, is driving you to do this work? Seriously.
I don't know. As cliche as it can sound, it's a drive to give back what was given so richly to me. I had the good fortune when I was struggling in my own life 20 years ago and needing to work on stuff that I was met with a person who was very trauma informed. And that was Janet Leff, my first sponsor, who has since passed away. And I write about her in several of my pieces, that she was trauma informed before it was cool, before we were really talking about it as a field. And it's my hope and my wish that anybody who seeks help has the experience that I had with her, of having this understanding of what trauma is, how it affects human behavior, and that healing it requires more than just talking. Mm-hmm. So that's still my drive, is to make sure people have those kind of experiences.
But you're not just doing therapy. I mean, you're doing a lot of things. You're writing books, you're doing expressive art, so how did this, is this just like, this is who I am, this is what I need to do?
It's pretty fair to say. I mean, one thing I've learned about myself in my own personal work is I get bored just doing one thing. I really give a shout out to those people who are able to work 40 hours a week clinically, because I did that for many years. And I know when I did that, I felt like my teacher part was kind of not being fed and my creative artist part wasn't being fed. So I've done enough focus on myself to know that there are very different parts of what make me personally and professionally. And part of why I've diversified my professional life is I feel there's all these different aspects of me that need nourished and fed. And yet to me, they all make sense of how they fit together.
Right. Well, I mean, it's certainly impressive. And like I said, it's inspiring. I mean, I talk to a lot of people who are in this field, and I don't know if I could recall anyone really who's doing, you have a lot of facets of yourself that are lit up, and that's pretty cool.
Thank you. And
yeah, you're welcome.
My honor to share that light.
Awesome. So let's talk about this new book, Process Not Perfection, Expressive Arts, Solutions for Trauma Recovery. And is this out? I know the Kindle version is available.
Yes, April 15th is the official release date. So I don't know when this podcast will drop, but April 15th, it should be ready for wide order. That's what is scheduled.
Okay.
And the Kindle version is available for pre-order right now.
Awesome. All right. So with all your other books, why this book? What inspired you to do this one?
Well, expressive arts therapy is where so much of my soul lies. I think I've shared on the podcast before, especially when I was talking about Dancing Mindfulness, how dance and writing and music have all been big parts of recovery for me personally. It's been a joy to share those with clients. Visual art has recently, I'd say in the last couple of years, become an even more important part of what I do and share, because that was kind of the last edge I had to conquer in my personal practice. And so why I love expressive arts therapy so much as a field is because it's integrative and multimodal. And even though people know me as Dancing Mindfulness, fundamentally Dancing Mindfulness is an expressive arts practice because we take an all of the above approach to the creative arts. And I've used that with clients since the beginning. I remember my first internship supervisor said, "Oh, you do creative things. Do that with the kids. Maybe that'll work." And I was kind of grateful that she was too burned out to care, because it gave me a template for really noticing how the arts that I love so much can be used as an adjunct to therapy. So it's something I've done all along. But I noticed when the Dancing Mindfulness aspects of my work became more public, as I officially released that in 2012, and the book came out in 2015, and then our community really started aligning with expressive arts therapy at that point, that a lot of the clinicians I was serving in my trainings just became really hungry for more material on expressive arts. And there's a lot of good material to be had out there. Some of it, though, is just kind of so overly clinical and written by the textbook companies. And then my personal expressive arts teacher, a woman named Christine Paintner, does beautiful expressive arts work, but largely from a Christian perspective. And I know that that is an edge for some people. Even though she's very progressive, they don't want to seek out her work because of that more spiritual slant. So I felt there was a real need for a book that is serving of the general public, something that clinicians can use if they need, but it's not being published by a major level clinical press that would make the book unaffordable for the general public. So like with a lot of things, I try to put out something that as many audiences as possible can benefit from. And we can talk a little bit more about, if you have interest, the specific content of the book, but that is kind of my vision and why I want to get this book out there now.
Yeah, definitely. So let's, just to be clear and define our terms here. Again, expressive arts is what?
It's the all of the above approach to creativity. So by definition, the field of expressive arts therapy uses dance, music, writing of all its forms, visual art of all its forms, theater. In the book, I even talk about food prep and gardening as being forms of expressive arts. And so with due respect to fields like dance therapy, music therapy, and art therapy, their focus can be a little more singular on that one form, whereas expressive arts therapy really is that intermodal and multimodal way to look at using the arts and healing. And I also like the use of the term expressive arts because I think a lot of clients feel they're not creative because they don't have anything original to contribute. But most clients I've worked with can get behind the word expressive because there's a recognition that we all have something to express.
Right. So it's kind of almost destigmatized or takes the charge out of...
Takes the charge out.
Right. Like I'm going to be judged for what I'm doing in therapy. Right.
And speaking to the title of the book, expressive arts therapy as a practice, as a field, is known for its emphasis on process. So process, not outcome, and process, not analysis. So in expressive arts therapy, we're not analyzing people's movements. We're not analyzing kind of what they drew on the paper to interpret it for multiple meanings. It's they are expressing what they have to express, and we use that expression as a springboard for deeper conversation. And there's even a whole different way of sharing feedback in expressive arts therapy that I really like and just speaks to this power of process.
Yeah, I mean, I love the title. I mean, I love the idea of process over perfection. For me, what comes up is this sense of the moment, being in the moment and being able to honor that. So let's talk more about the content. Let's dive in there. How do you want to begin with that?
So let's continue with this idea of process, because I'm an EMDR therapist, and we use the word process quite a bit in EMDR. And why I love the word process so much is it's both a noun and a verb. So as a verb, we talk about like being in process or processing emotions or just experiencing process. Whereas the noun process in expressive arts therapy really kind of denotes this idea that it's a set of several practices that we put together. So in the book, I have given readers 15 expressive arts therapy processes. So a process in this book is 6 to 7 separate practices. Okay. And all of the processes have a theme. So for example, the first process is grounding. And that is obviously a skill that as trauma therapists, we want to be able to teach people. So we are in the process of learning the skill of grounding. And there are 6 practices of the different various art forms and their variations that I use to teach people about grounding. So the reason why there are 15 processes or processes, however you want to look at it, is I have the book divided into 3 sections that directly correspond with the 3 general phases of trauma therapy. The idea of stabilization, processing or deepening, and then this idea of reintegration. So the 5 processes that work with stabilization are really about laying the groundwork, making sure you feel comfortable enough to engage in your expressive arts journey. That's where we use processes on skills like grounding, mindfulness, distress tolerance. And then if people are feeling ready to go deeper, the second 5 sets of processes will go a little deeper into the work. And then the last 3, or the third section and the last 5 processes, are really all about carrying expressive arts out as a way of life, to either maintain the gains of trauma recovery, addiction recovery, or to continue to deepen, but with more of this spirit of maintenance. So that's how the book was organized.
Cool. So can you, I kind of feel like I'm going to put you on the spot here, but I kind of feel like you like that.
Yeah.
Share an example of, a client maybe you were working with where you were able to utilize either, one of those processes? Sure.
Gosh, there's so many stories. Where do I even begin? I remember very clearly a client I was working with who, so speaking to your question about using this with a client, I use expressive arts in various ways. Sometimes we only have a chance to use one practice in any given session. So, for example, during closure in EMDR or any other modality I might be doing, we may take it to the page, which is my way of talking about writing. So it could be we do a poem, we do some free verse writing. There's another beautiful practice called gush art, where you use the materials that are available to you and just kind of get out whatever you feel you still may need to leave in the office. The container practice is another practice that I cover in the book. So in EMDR and some other forms of trauma therapy, we talk a lot about the importance of having a visual container. So visualizing a container where you can leave unfinished business from a session. So in expressive arts, we can actually work with people to make a container using art supplies that are available in the office, you can even with certain clients kind of set them off with an assignment of making a container. But there's one client I'm working with right now, and she's been very public about her story, so I can certainly share it, where we really are using expressive arts in its purest sense, because in every session we're exploring about 2 or 3 different art forms. So she has taken expressive arts very seriously as an in-between session practice. So often she will come into a session sharing with me what she has written in between sessions, or what she has painted. Sometimes she collages, but painting has become her primary thing in between sessions. And so we use what she brings to me at the beginning of session really in place of the, hi, how are you today? And she'll be like, here's what I've created in between sessions. And in the spirit of expressive arts therapy, I'll tell her what I notice or what is speaking to me, but you don't analyze it. It's just, this is what's jumping out at me. And then often from that, it becomes a good springboard into doing EMDR reprocessing if she wishes to do a session of EMDR that day. And then we might close with some painting or some writing. Some days in place of EMDR, she would choose to do more of the dance or the dance movement that we do in Dancing Mindfulness. So if a theme is coming up in her writing and painting, like needing to bloom out of my shell, we may do some dance movement that really encourages her to work with those different movements. And I always allow a collaborative relationship with my clients to let them choose the music that they're using. And on that token, and this is the last example I'll give you to this rather long-winded answer, I love working with people to make playlists or collections of music. I think it's a beautiful adjunct to therapy. I grew up in the 80s where we did, pressing play record on the radio in order to make the collection of music we wanted. And in this day and age, technology like the MP3 players and iTunes and Spotify has made it so much easier to put together a collection of music. So I encourage people to put together a playlist of music that they may find especially grounding or especially invigorating. Maybe they keep a spiritual playlist if that's part of their belief system, because I think it is a really good in-between session coping skill and between session container. And sometimes clients will bring me, this is the music I've been listening to this week. And that will be the start of our session, and we'll work with that.
Very cool. Again, that word collaborative comes up a lot. Who's the target audience for this book?
It's a very big target audience in that I have specifically written this one for the general public. And the only other book of mine that really had that general of a focus was the Dancing Mindfulness book. And I'm very clear in the introduction that you can engage in the practices in this book without being in therapy. However, if you are feeling over your head at any point, here are some safety measures you can take. This may be a good indicator to maybe seek out professional help and professional assistance, and we give people some resources where they can get some ideas about that. Because I do think there's a whole market of people out there who either can't afford therapy or who are in a physical location in the country where they can't access it very easily. For instance, I do a lot of training in the state of Montana, and I take it for granted, even in Ohio, how easy it can be to access a therapist. And a lot of people just can't, either because of resources. So I've been very careful to write a book that's not a replacement for therapy, but certainly can be better than nothing for people who can't access it. So, and I also write in there that a good audience is for people who are looking for more maintenance level work. So maybe who have gone through a course of professional treatment or professional therapy and are looking for some practices that they can continue on their own. And I'm also very clear that the book can be a good adjunct to therapy for people who are in therapy. And I am careful to let them know, run this by your therapist that you're working with to see how they might be able to work this into your therapeutic process. And of course, any professional clinician who picks up the book, who has an interest in expressive arts, they're clearly able to weave the concepts and practices and processes into their existing modality. But I would say the language of this book, the audience of this book, certainly it's been written for everyone, for the general public.
Okay. Yeah, I was curious about whether you thought it would be good for just a therapist to pick up, to use, to get some ideas from. Now, what about someone who's listening, therapists or coaches listening to this podcast who are thinking, well, I'm not a expressive arts therapist,
And it's a good question that gets brought up in a lot of realms of psychotherapy. Like, for instance, do you have to go through the whole DBT certification to do DBT? Or is this something that you can pick up a DBT book and at least get some skills from it? And I would say, at very least, if you are a good, solid clinician who knows how to keep people safe, this is a book you can pick up and use in your therapeutic process. My only request would be that you do the processes and practices yourself first. Because one of the setbacks of having more of like a guidebook or manual type book like this is there could be just this temptation to make a copy and give it to your client. Or, well, okay, I'm going to read this step by step. You won't know how to handle the modifications you may need to make. You won't know how to handle some of the resistances that come up if you haven't first tried it yourself. So for any therapist who's thinking of getting this book, an invitation I would make to you is pick it up for yourself first. Learn a little bit about your own relationship and connection with expression first. And then once you have that experience, you'll be in a much better position to share this with clients.
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate that explanation. What jumped out to me, Jamie, is the way you put the book together in terms of kind of following or using the 3 steps of, the grounding. What was it? Grounding.
Well, the whole idea of stabilization, preparation,
yeah.
Then processing or deepening, and then reintegration or kind of continuing with it in life.
Right, and then using that as a kind of the scaffolding to put together the processes. I love that. I mean, I think for a therapist would be like, this is really kind of user friendly, if I can use that that phrase in a sense. What about people who are thinking, I'll be honest, when I was in therapy, one of the many times I was in therapy, being expressive was something that, even though I was, I went to art school and I would consider myself pretty creative, I was scared of being judged.
Yeah.
And I know that's my own stuff, but what do you say to people who are like that?
That's most people's barrier with this. That's truly most people's barrier with this. So what I would say to people like that is I would relate. I would certainly relate. And I actually have a new blog post coming out this week. I can share it with you if you want to offer it as a supplement, because it's kind of my explanation of why I chose the image I did for the book. And I'll share a little of my story with it, that for years I didn't approach visual art because that's the one I was bad at. I'd grown up as a dancer. I'd grown up on stage doing theater, a musician, obviously a writer. So there was some evidence over the years that I was good at those things in one way or another. So I had no problem approaching them as such, but I was always the worst kid in art class. I couldn't draw a stick figure to save my life. And so because there was that external metric judging me, I was very hesitant to approach visual arts for the longest time. And then eventually I did, just because it's fun. It's fun. Who cares if I can't draw a stick figure? And Guy, it was because it was so fun that I had the most to learn. Because that whole idea of me being good at something just was never an issue in visual art. And even that flower image that appears on the front of the book, that came about because I made a mistake painting something that I had intended to paint. And so I took a paper towel and just wiped it away, and that thing showed up.
Cool. I'm looking at the cover right now. It's very cool.
Yeah. And I filled in some of the gaps with a little bit of paint, and then I stepped back and it was like, I made that. And that to me is process, where you're willing to work with the failures, quote unquote, or the mistakes, and not be so fixated on outcome. And so if a person comes in having this fear of being judged, I guess I would meet them with congratulations. So does just about everyone else I've worked with, and so have I. And I can still deal with that as an issue. So maybe we could just approach it as having fun. This isn't going to hang in a museum.
Right.
So published in the New York Times. Can we just approach it as having fun?
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. So, all right. The book's coming out April 15th.
Yes.
The Kindle version is already available. I'll have all this linked up at the show notes page at the Trauma
And
Therapist.
let me just explain quickly to people where you may prefer the Kindle version. Is, those of you who order Kindle, is we are able to publish art samples in color on the Kindle version. Whereas in the printed version, due to making the cost most accessible to everybody, we had to do the art samples in black and white. We do have a supplementary website, traumamadesimple.com/PNP for the book, that people can look at art samples. Because the other thing I really love about this book is different members of my community and people who follow my work. I gave an open submission if they wanted to have their work featured in this book. So we probably have about 20 contributors who have poems and art pieces in the book. So if you really like to see things in full living color and you are a Kindle person, you might like the Kindle better than the printed version. But even if you do get the print version, you can still access the color art online.
Okay, awesome. Now, before we go here, I just want to get take a temperature gauge from you on. You do a lot. You're traveling all over. You're working with a lot of different populations and so forth. What's your thought on how trauma-informed therapy? And I think last time we talked, you even thought there was a better phrase instead of
trauma-focused.
Trauma-focused. Okay. Where do you think the state of trauma-focused therapy is for therapists in terms of, it's obviously becoming more popular now, but what's your take on that?
I believe there's more of a willingness to embrace it now than 10 years ago when I started teaching. 10 years ago, I was more likely when I spoke in different places in the country to hear things like, oh, I don't want to hear it's all about trauma. Everybody thinks they have a hard life and they've had it worse. Whereas most clinicians who come forward to my trainings now recognize that unhealed trauma really is a major factor. And if they're not having that validated in their work sites, they do find it very refreshing to come to trainings like I offer or other people on your podcast would offer who are willing to go there when it comes to talking about the massive impact of unhealed trauma on human wounding and the human experience. So, I think like a lot of things, there's a lot farther to go. But I do feel there's more headway that has been made and more conversations that are being had than we did a decade ago.
Okay. Yeah. I just wanted, that's been my sense from what I've been doing here. And I just wanted to check in with you. All right, Jamie. So once again, the book is Process Not Perfection, Expressive Arts Solutions for Trauma Recovery. Again, I'll have this linked up at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. What's next for you?
So this is the first place I will publicly announce that my next writing project, I've already been working on it, is an updated edition of Trauma and the 12 Steps. So that book first came out in 2012, and obviously a lot has happened since 2012 in the field of trauma, and I've done a lot of teaching on this whole idea of trauma-informing addiction treatment in the last 7-8 years. So I've been wanting to do a second edition for quite some time. So I just got signed with North Atlantic Books, who have published Peter Levine, is probably the biggest name in trauma world. They've worked with Gabor Mate as well. So I'm very happy that they saw the usefulness in putting out a second edition. And I'm hoping to also do a couple companion pieces with that, a meditation reader, a step workbook, just to continue, because so much of what drives me, going back to your original question, is this idea of recognizing that being trauma-informed, being trauma-focused is for everybody. Every aspect of the field. And obviously coming into this work through the field of addiction, that's been my primary home base, that I've been trying to preach the gospel of trauma-focused, trauma-informed care. And so I'll be very, very happy to be working on that writing in the next few months.
Awesome. Congratulations on that publisher. I mean, that's awesome. That's amazing. It's an honor, and I'm honored that they saw the value in the work. Jamie, it's a pleasure having you back on here. You are welcome anytime. The door is open for you to come on the podcast. I love having you on here. And again, like I said, I don't want to overuse this word, but it's just inspiring. Your energy is infectious. And I'm just like psyched that there are people out there like you who are doing this work.
Thank you. And I always love talking to you. You ask the best questions, and good luck with continuing this wave of Trauma Therapist 2.0 going.
All right. Take care.
Thanks, Guy.
CPTSDfoundation.org provides daily recovery support, live group calls, 365 days a year. All calls are led by trauma-informed advocates, authors, and highly respected practitioners in the field of trauma recovery. CPTSDfoundation.org helps survivors connect with others who've walked through the fire of abuse and are on a path toward healing. After working with thousands of survivors all around the world, they know how to help you escape the shame of abuse by connecting with like-minded individuals so you can finally feel like healing is possible. Stop isolating between therapy appointments. Getting re-traumatized with your current strategy is no longer necessary. Reach out to CPTSD Foundation today and discover the life-changing, daily, trauma-informed peer support you've been waiting for. That's CPTSDfoundation.org. You know how deeply trauma impacts your client's mind, body, and emotions, and how difficult healing can be. You have clients who are constantly and unpredictably triggered by their traumatic experiences, controlled by emotions of shame, anxiety, anger, depression, and fear, and even turning to substance abuse, cutting, and other harmful behaviors to cope. World-renowned expert and author Dr. Janina Fisher's proven approach to complex trauma treatment, which is based on 40-plus years of research and clinical practice, addresses the holistic impact of trauma to effectively heal deep trauma and attachment wounds so clients can break free from the past, feel safe, calm, and thrive in life. If you're ready to become a certified complex trauma treatment professional and master neurobiologically informed treatments that will heal trauma, save marriages and families, and help clients take back their lives, then join my friends over at Pessy and save $500 today by signing up at www.pessy.com/trauma treatment. That's www.pessy, spelled PESI.com/trauma treatment.